The Uncharted series has always been a favourite of mine. I first got to experience it back in 2013 when I picked up the trilogy for the PS3 at a fairly low price. A couple of years later, I ended up playing the trilogy again on PS4 and wound up loving it even more. Then in 2016, Uncharted 4: A Thief's End was released. I never played it until now, 2020, which is weird considering how much I loved the first three games. I might cover the first three games in a future video series, but for today we'll be talking about the amazing conclusion to Nathan Drake's story. I do have to warn, there's slight story spoilers ahead, but I'm really only talking about how the story is set up. Trust me, there are a lot of interesting plot developments which I'm leaving out here because you need to experience them for yourself. Uncharted 4, like other installments in the series, throws you into the action immediately with the prologue. A stormy ocean with Nathan Drake behind the wheel of a boat with his older brother in the back. They're being chased by enemy boats, and after a quick standoff they make a beeline for an island when another boat crashes into them, throwing the two brothers overboard and straight into the sea. I think this opening is very powerful as it creates an atmosphere of wanting to get to that point in the story and feeling the need to find out why they're in that situation in the first place. After this, it cuts to a young Nathan Drake, which honestly isn't an interesting part of the story. It just tells you a little bit about his relationship with his older brother and that they had a bit of a rough childhood. After that, there's another cut. This time it's Nathan fighting in a Panamanian prison. This is still before the events of Uncharted 1 and it offers a little character development and backstory to how Nathan lost his brother. A very wealthy man named Rafe was able to get himself, Nathan and Sam into a prison which housed a treasure in an old abandoned prison building from the 1600s. They banked on making a fortune on this score. When finding out that it was only a clue leading them to a cathedral in Scotland, they conveniently got caught fighting by the prison warden Vargas that got them into the prison in the first place. He then took them to his office and demanded a 25% cut of the 400 million reward. Rafe shakes Vargas's hand to seal the deal, but stupidly shanks Vargas, who shot off his gun and alerted the other guards. They're forced to run and try escape. This leads to an intense chase where, so close to escaping, Sam gets gunned down. Nathan and Rafe have no choice but to leave him. Extremely reluctant to leave his brother, a devastated Nathan and Rafe make their escape. One more cut and it's the modern day. After the events of the first three Uncharted games, Nathan has settled down and has a job recovering underwater salvage. This Nathan Drake is not who we're used to. He's grounded and cautious. He wouldn't even accept a salvage job without a permit. The next morning, Nathan's doing paperwork in his office and the door keeps getting knocked. He opens it and it's none other than his brother Sam, miraculously alive, waiting to see him. After getting reacquainted, Sam admits he's in a lot of trouble and needs help. He escaped from the prison with the help of a drug lord called Hector Alcazar, also known as the Butcher of Panama. After an intense fight to break out of the prison, it turns out Hector Alcazar only wanted Sam because he knew Sam could bring him a cut of Avery's treasure, the treasure that got Sam stuck in prison to begin with. He held Sam at knife point, giving him 3 months to find the treasure and give him half of the money, or he would track him down and have no mercy. The start of the game was very story heavy, but it does set up Uncharted 4 amazingly. Not only does it give Nathan a reason to get back into the fortune hunting game, it introduces his brother Sam into the story, who was never mentioned in the first three games. What I've said only scratches the surface of what happens in Uncharted 4. I never like going too crazy with plot details, as these things are best experienced with a controller in your hand. That holds particularly true to these Naughty Dog games, which are storytelling masterpieces and are some of the best PlayStation exclusives you can play. The Uncharted 4 story is just one of those gripping single-player experiences you will only find on PlayStation, and I highly recommend you play the game to see how the plot pans out, because there are some genuinely shocking twists in it. Having a great story is one thing, but something more important is gameplay. If the gameplay isn't good, then it all falls apart. The Uncharted games are known for having lots and lots of climbing, and Uncharted 4 is no different. The only thing is, I'm not sure if it's just in my head because the game looks a lot nicer than past Uncharted games, but the climbing definitely feels smoother or more refined in this one. I just can't pinpoint if there is actually a change to it or not, but it works fluently 99% of the time, and it never felt like a chore because you're normally climbing the side of great looking environments. Something that was introduced to spice up the whole climbing aspect of Uncharted is the grapple hook. It definitely does break up the pacing of the game in just the right ways, and it's very fluent in the way it works. It also gave the ability for the developers to make more interesting climbing set pieces, and that's kind of a recurring theme I've found with Uncharted 4. The first 3 games are great, but the 4th game is great and just generally more interesting with the things it throws at you. One last thing they added to make climbing more varied was the Python, however you say it. You get it a little over halfway into the game, and it's essentially a little dagger that you can stick into certain walls to make a sort of temporary handhold that, yeah, makes things more interesting, but they barely utilised it, so I'm not 100% sure it was the best addition to the game. I guess it's better than not adding anything else though. Another staple of the Uncharted series, and something I've come to expect, is puzzles. Now, these puzzles aren't super cryptic or anything, but they require a solid amount of thinking, and they're sprinkled throughout the game in just the right way so you don't feel like they're slowing you down at all. I might rate the difficulty of them at maybe a 5 out of 10 at a push. There was one where you have to rotate crucifixes on a load of circles, and it was super confusing, but apart from that, most of them were a breeze to complete. They are a little harder than the puzzles you'd get in one of the older God of War games, but like I say, mostly easy enough. And if you encounter one that's particularly puzzling, you could always look up a guide video on YouTube, which I surprisingly didn't have to do. I do, however, know that's an option because of that stupid globe puzzle in Uncharted 3. Plus, I'm sure there are a million walkthroughs out there of people playing the game. The thing about playing the 4th installment in a series in order is you have a great idea of the main characters you're dealing with. And if you've came back for a 4th game, you probably enjoy the way these characters are portrayed. And of course, that's how I feel about Uncharted 4. I mean, Nathan Drake is this wisecrack who, even in very tense situations, will make you laugh with the things he comes out with. Then Elena and Scully are just like they are in the other games, and it's great to see their relationships with Nathan Drake again. Sam, Nathan's brother, has never appeared before, but the first few hours of the game tie him into the story perfectly, and it honestly feels like he's always been there. The way he gets on with Nathan, the little jokes they make to each other, are entertaining and never feel out of place. I love the writing in this game. It's funny when it needs to be and serious when it has to be. The way all the characters interact with each other is perfect, and that should come at no surprise. It is a Naughty Dog game after all. Throughout each chapter, there are a few little collectibles called treasures, and they're definitely hidden quite well. You really need to be searching every corner to get them all. They don't serve a massive purpose, it's just nice to pick one up, I guess. You can inspect them in the pause menu, and yeah, they look kinda cool, but I didn't really bother with them at all. I think in my playthrough I picked up about 20 out of 109, because they aren't essential, and I don't think I want to be the guy who walks around with a t-shirt that says I picked up all the Uncharted 4 treasures if I did it. Because why would you write that on a t-shirt? You're just making yourself a target to everyone who collected all the treasures and the huge amount of journal entries in each chapter. They're the psychopaths you need to be looking out for. What is essentially the third big gameplay aspect after climbing and puzzles is you have combat. Combat really hasn't changed since Uncharted 1. I mean, it works, yeah, you shoot cool guns and you're practically invincible, but they did lay the combat foundation down in 2007, so it seems just a little out of date. In saying that, the combat is fun and there are some refinements in this game that I enjoy. The cover mechanics are fairly standard for a third-person shooter. You hit circle and the enemies can't hit you. The thing about the Uncharted 4 cover system is most cover available is destructible, meaning you have to move about and think fast. It adds a bit of variety to the game, which is appreciated. Like, the little details are what makes it. At one point in the game, you're using sandbags as cover, and when they get shot, you can see them slowly empty. And I think back in 2015 or 2016, I seen a video showing off the cover in Uncharted 4. I can't really remember, but I think at the time the sandbags emptying was a really technically impressive thing that they were able to do, but I can't really remember, it was so long ago. There's a wide variety of guns to pick up throughout Uncharted 4, such as shotguns, rifles, snipers, pistols, etc. And you just pick them up off the ground as you go along. There isn't much more to it other than some of them are a little bit better damage-wise, but are a lot rarer, so your time actually using them is considerably short. One more thing combat-related that you're encouraged to do, but I really didn't bother with, is stealth. I'm no good at stealth, and I find it more fun to go mad firing at the enemies anyway, but the few times I did try to be stealthy, it certainly made the combat encounter a little easier once all hell inevitably broke out. Nathan Drake has a journal that he fills out throughout the course of the game. Your main use case scenario for it is using the pictures in it to solve puzzles, which can be pretty fun. It's just annoying that you have to slowly bring up the journal when you need to double check something. All the notes you pick up are stored in the journal as well, so you can read them at any point. And Nathan draws things relevant to the story as you progress, which is nice to look at. I know the AI in Naughty Dog games gets ragged on a lot for not being helpful at all, but I think they did a good job in Uncharted 4. In combat situations, Sam, who is with you for most of the game, genuinely helps with taking down enemies, and the way the characters talk to each other is pretty entertaining. When you're not climbing cliff faces or running about, there are a few other ways you get to traverse Uncharted 4's diverse landscapes, the first of which is by jeep. The main part of the game you have a jeep is when driving around Madagascar, and it's fine. That's what I like to say about things that aren't very interesting but definitely exist. I mean, the jeep gameplay is a little refreshing, but it turns stale after a nice 5 minutes. You also get to drive a boat for a small portion of the game. It's just like the jeep, but on water. I don't really know what else to say there. Finally, there are sections where you are forced to swim. I am not entirely sure who keeps giving the green light to underwater sections in video games when they are so widely disliked. In Uncharted 4, it's fine, but the best part about it is you don't spend too much time swimming. I've got to quickly talk about how amazing the graphics are in this game. I played on PS4 Pro, so certainly got the nicer experience, but I've read that it still looks amazing on the base PS4. I've also read different places that it plays in full 4K on the Pro, but the PlayStation EU blog had a post back in November 2016 saying it's 1440p, and they are probably more likely to be correct than other sources. Regardless of what resolution you're playing at, it really doesn't matter. The environments are stunning and vast. They are really astonishing nature environments that feel pretty unique to Uncharted, and I love it. From start to finish, I really enjoyed just taking in all the scenery. Plus the fact you go all over the world in this game, you get so much variety and no two locations look that similar to each other. Finally, I want to share if I feel this was a good conclusion to Nathan Drake's story. Obviously, I'm not going to give away the ending, but honestly, I think that this game's ending was what a big Uncharted fan would want. I'm trying to be as vague as possible here despite the fact the game has been out a good while, but yeah, it was a nice conclusion to the story. It's hard to handle ending something like this, and I think the team over at Naughty Dog did a great job at landing it. I'd highly recommend Uncharted 4 to anyone not sure if they want to jump into the series. You don't necessarily have to play the first 3 games to enjoy Uncharted 4, but there are little things you'll end up missing if you haven't played them. All in all, as a long-term fan of the franchise, I was happy with the ending of Uncharted 4. One last thing before you go, if I have convinced you to buy Uncharted 4 and try it out for yourself, I have an Amazon link down in the description that takes you to where you can purchase it. Using that link really helps support the channel. Another thing you can do to support the channel if you enjoyed is hit the like button. It only takes a second. Also, if you want to see more videos by me, please consider subscribing. Finally, thank you very much for watching.